Okay, thanks a lot for introducing and inviting me. Let me now share my screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen. So today I'm going to present my paper called Can Social Media Platforms Limit Disinformation? And so I want to reiterate that it would be great if you could interrupt me with clarifying questions and comments, which would be very useful to me because it's still unpublished work. So basically, I'm going to present this paper, which contains a game theoretic model of fact-checking on social media. And if we have a lot of time left, I'm going to talk about my previous research that was mentioned, but it is absolutely not necessary. If we don't have time for this, I won't present it. So I will present it if and only if we have a lot of spare time. Okay, so the paper is called Can Social Media Limit Disinformation? What's the problem that I consider? So there is a big concern about politicians spreading disinformation on social media. So by disinformation, I mean that politicians know how things really are, but they are trying to mislead their voters to increase their popularity. So one example would be that Brazilian President Bolsonaro denied that COVID is a real threat, and he advocated a bogus kind of treatment, which doesn't really work. So a possible reason he was doing that was that he didn't create a big supply of vaccines or couldn't handle the pandemic in Brazil. So his strategy was to just deny that anything is going wrong. So another example is Trump's claim that he won the election. So even though there were no evidence of him winning the recent election in 2020, he claimed that he did win it. So what's a possible remedy against it? So one practice about which we're going to talk about today is fact-checking. So fact-checking exists not only in politics. It's a general practice of labeling and correcting misinformation or disinformation on social media. So if Facebook sees something which potentially is misleading, not necessarily in politics, they have a policy of putting a label saying that this is possibly false and giving its users a more credible source to find how things really are. So the question of this paper is, when do social media platforms decide to fact check politicians, so to apply this practice to political statements, and what are the policy implications for the government? So if we have a government which acts as a social planner, tries to regulate social media to help voters make better decisions, what should the government do? So, and the way we are going to talk about this is that I'm going to present some case studies which are going to illustrate the logic which I think is going on, and I'm going to formalize this intuition, these case studies, using a game theoretic model. This is an example of fact checking. So, and a post to which it is applied. So this is a a Facebook post by Donald Trump, who is saying that there is something fishy going on with mail by ballot, which was a very common practice during this election because of the pandemic. And so Facebook puts a correction that there is nothing wrong about voting by mail. And they also cite in a source of where to learn more about voting by mail. So this is how typical fact checking of political statements on Facebook looks like. So one thing to pay attention with regard to fact checking is that fact checking doesn't entail just removing a post or blocking a person. Fact checking normally implies that the post remains to be visible, but they're putting this correction to it. So here is a summary of the model with which I'm going to think about fact checking. So imagine that there is one incumbent politician in a country. There are no elections on the horizon, so she's the only politician in the focus of attention. And she's using social media to send some messages to voters to make them vote for her in the future. So the politician can misrepresent facts on social media because it can help her increase her popularity. Mm, So in turn, the platforms may fact check the politician. They may apply this procedure I just mentioned. And there are various reasons why platforms can fact check politicians. Maybe they have some corporate values. Maybe they have some employees which are pushing for that. Maybe they have the government which is pushing for that, uh, and so on. And clearly, there are voters we need to consider. We need to consider in the situation. Voters care about the politician's competence and they care about the ideology. So voters are trying to learn from what the politician posts on social media about whether this politician is actually a competent person or not. They are trying to look at how the politician defends her past policy decisions, maybe. So the more competent is a politician, the more happy they are about voting for her. On average. But on the other hand, the voters have ideology, of course. Even if the person is not super competent, they might vote for this person simply because of ideological proximity. So the main conclusion of the model is going to be that if there is one platform, let's say Facebook, which is much better for the users than anything else in the country. So let's say Facebook is really big and all the competitors of Facebook are small, then amazingly fact-checking is more likely, and also sincere behavior of politicians is more likely. So the policy implication of this is going to be that the government should not break up firms like Facebook and divide them into smaller firms, which is one of the plans in the current US administration. And also the government shouldn't make it easier for voters to switch from one platform to another. So this measure might seem to be a natural thing, which is good because it destroys the monopoly power of firms like Facebook. However, the model will show that this thing can undermine incentives for fact-checking. So this is like a policy-related conclusion of the model. And there's also just a positive and not normative conclusion of the model that if the voters are ideologically close to a politician, then fact-checking and truth-telling are less likely. So on the next two slides, I'll summarize in words and use some examples why I think this is true, and then I will proceed to the model. So the first conclusion is that if Facebook is better for users than its competitors, then fact-checking is more likely. So imagine a scenario where there is one politician in a country, and in a country there are just two social media platforms, and they are called Facebook and Parler. So Facebook fact checks or may decide to fact check, while Parler is some media outlet which just never fact checks. Parler's policy is that we're not fact checking, basically. So the politician initially uses Facebook and posts some false facts on Facebook to justify maybe her policies, which are not as good as they may seem. So in response, Facebook starts fact checking her. Then the politician has a choice. She may stay on Facebook and just suffer from fact checking, which will expose her negative sides to voters, or she may switch to Parler. So she may say, I'm going off Facebook and I'm switching to Parler because there is free speech on Parler. So when will she decide to indeed do this? When will she decide to abandon a bigger platform like Facebook and switch to a smaller platform like Parler? So imagine that Facebook is really big, so and Parler is really small. Then suppose that the politician just leaves Facebook and goes to Parler and tells its voters, now you're going to follow me on Parler. Well, then if Parler is really small, no one likes it compared to Facebook, then not many people will join Parler because of this, because of the politician. So as a result, if the politician stops using Facebook and will only use Parler, then she will not be able to communicate to the majority of the audience, to the majority of voters. So knowing that, the politician will stay in Facebook. She has no alternative. So because of this, Facebook will know that the politician will not leave it if it starts fact-checking. And so Facebook will indeed fact-check the politician. So imagine the reverse scenario. Suppose that like Parler is comparable to Facebook. This is a situation somewhat like the United States today, where a lot of conservatives are leaving Facebook to Parler. So imagine that this situation is possible. Then the politician can think, okay, Facebook is fact-checking me now, so I can leave Facebook and go to Parler. saying that Parler is good because it has free speech. So as a result of this, maybe the majority of voters or enough voters will indeed leave Facebook and join Parler. Okay, so in this case, if the politician uses Parler, not Facebook, then she will still be able to communicate to the majority of voters, and she will not suffer from fact checking. So the politician will indeed do that if Facebook starts fact checking her. So because of this, Facebook will think, if I start fact checking this guy, then she will just leave to Facebook, and a lot of my users will also leave Facebook and go to Parler. So it's better not to fact check the politician to preserve the audience. So as a result, if Parler is comparable to Facebook, then Facebook will not fact check. So here are a couple of examples. So politicians indeed try to maneuver away from social media that fact check them and go to somewhere else where they are not. In Brazil, President Bolsonaro, who I already mentioned, was fact checked because of his code disinformation. And he wrote posts to voters saying that he is now going to use Parler and Telegram. So he said, please follow me on these two social media. So I'm not sure if you know Telegram. Telegram is a messenger where you can also have a channel. It's not quite a social network, but it's big in some countries. But in Brazil, the vast majority of people are using Facebook. A very tiny minority are using Parler and Telegram. So this attempt to go away from Facebook to Parler and Telegram was not successful. He didn't get nearly as many followers on these social media compared to Facebook. So he had to stay on Facebook despite there being fact checking. So this logic also allows us to compare countries, and the hypothesis would be that if Facebook has a really big market share in the country compared to its competitors, then there will be more fact checking. So indeed, in Israel and Brazil, where Facebook dominates the market and the audiences of other social media are tiny, there is active fact checking, including fact checking of politicians. So in Germany, there's not as high a usage of Facebook as in other countries. There is a big usage of Twitter. And so Facebook doesn't have this kind of monopoly power. So it's possible that because of this, Facebook doesn't have an active fact-checking policy in Germany. So I think this is not just because German politicians are more sincere. For example, there is the Alternative for Germany party in Germany, which misrepresents information about the number of migrants and their criminality, and recently about the effects of COVID. So another conclusion of the model is a bit more subtle, and it is that if the politician is ideologically close to the majority of voters, then there will be less fact-checking. So why is that? Again, imagine the same scenario. There's a politician in a country, and this country has Facebook and Parler, and the politician is posting something on Facebook that Facebook may fact-check because it's not quite true. So suppose that the voters really like the politician just because of her ideology. So a lot of Trump supporters maybe don't think very specifically about his policies, but they like his rhetoric, his values, etc. So something not policy related, but what they like. So in this case, voters on average are happy to vote for this politician, even if she might be not very competent. So as a result, voters are interested in what the politician posts on social media. So if the politician leaves Facebook and only becomes active on Parler, then a significant number of voters may also leave Facebook and follow the politician on Parler. So as a result, if Facebook starts fact-checking such a politician, then she can leave Facebook to a smaller venue and make the majority of voters do the same. So this creates a credible threat for Facebook of losing the audience if Facebook starts fact-checking this politician. So as a result, Facebook will not fact-check the politician in the first place. Again, to give one example, Facebook fact-checked President Bolsonaro, who was quite unpopular because of his handling of COVID. He didn't fact-check the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi or the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, despite them not being quite sincere on social media, especially Modi. And the possible reason for this was that Orban and Modi are far more popular in their countries than Bolsonaro is in his country. Let me go to the model which formalizes this intuition using game theory. So I will first describe the setup of the game. I'll talk about the players, their payoffs and their actions, and then I'll discuss how the equilibrium looks like. So in this game, there is one incumbent politician. Again, this model is a scenario where there are no immediate elections and there is no challenger who can also say something. There are two platforms. They're called A and B in the paper, but you can think of Facebook and its biggest competitor. So player number one is politician. There are two players, which are the platforms. Then there are voters. The set of voters is modeled as a continuum from 0 to 1. And there is some probability function according to this, to which voters are distributed. Each voter is characterized by a number called R, which is between 0 and 1, and R models the ideology. So the higher is R, the more ideologically close you are to the politician. Also, you may have heard about the median voter theorems, and we'll need something like that as well here. So our median is the position of the median voter. This is a model primarily about signaling, because we're talking about things like persuasion and learning and fact-checking. There is going to be uncertainty about whether the politician is competent or not. So what can it model in the real world? Let's say the politician proposes to build a wall against the neighboring country. This can be either a good idea, a bad idea. The average voter may not know and may be willing to learn about this. The competence of the politician is modeled as a random variable, theta. So if theta is 1, the politician is competent. If theta is 0, she is not competent. And a priori, theta is equally likely to be 1 or 0. So we don't know initially whether the politician is competent or not. So next, the politician is going to communicate with voters on social media. So I'm going to use the following setup to model this communication. So any real politician must not just make statements about what she thinks about the world, but she also cites some think tanks, some media, some advisors who provide some evidence. So let's say Trump cited Fox News a lot to persuade his voters in the points he was making. Also, he had a team of advisors that everyone knew, and he was obviously also referring to these guys. So if we consider a democratic presidents, then obviously Democrats also rely on some media outlets, a group of people whom they can evidence from whom they can provide to voters to justify their point of view. So let's think about the politician's choice of these sources of information this way. She can pick the sources of information publicly, and she can pick the more loyal sources of information or more accurate sources of information. Let's say if Trump picks some advisors who are as conservative as he is, then he's picking a set of advisors who are very ideologically close to him, so most likely they would support his point of view. So, but he could have appointed different people who would be more objective, and this way, yes, they would criticize him more often, they would more often disagree with him, but on the other hand, they'd be more credible. Yes, question?
Yeah, just for the sake of clarification. So the politician is just using one platform at one time, or can also use multiple platforms at the same time. And the same question for the voters: can they also use both platforms if they're two?
Okay, so I assume that a politician can only use can use two platforms at the same time. This isn't going to affect the results really, but I allow this. So voters, I assume that voters are only using one platform at the same time, so they cannot use two platforms. I agree that it's a restrictive assumption. However, it really simplifies the model, and in the real world, people cannot be caught up on Twitter and Facebook at the same time, so they have to divide their time in any case. Okay, but let me just focus on this communication technology because I think it's not trivial. So basically, this politician is choosing one parameter which is modeled by the variable p, in which I call bias, and it models the loyalty of her sources. So if p is high, then the information sources are super loyal to her. They are very much likely to agree with her. But on the other hand, everyone knows that they are yes men and don't put a lot of trust in what they say. So if p is close to 0, then these let me call them advisors, are not as loyal. They might as well disagree with the politician, but they're more credible. So if they agree, then it means something because they are non-partisan. Okay, so then this is one thing the politician does. The other thing that the politician does is choose which platform to use. So she can choose one platform, the other platform, or both. And what the voters learn on the platform depends on fact checking. So suppose that this platform does not fact check. Then voters who are using the platform observe the signal, which works like this. So notice how the signal works. If the politician is competent, then the signal always informs people that she is competent. So if the idea to build a wall is good, then the politician's advisors always say that it's a good idea. So suppose that the politician is incompetent, let's say her past policies are bad. Then with probability p, the politician's advisors still say that it's a good idea to build a wall with probability p, where p measures how loyal they are. So again, if I invite yes men into my administration and cite them for evidence when I support my policies, then this p is very high. So if I, let's say, invite some economists in my administration who are non-partisan and who just care about the truth, then this p is low. They are unlikely to defend me if I do something wrong. Even the platform fact checks what the voters learn in it. Well, I make a strong assumption that if there is fact checking on the platform, then this platform sends a completely truthful signal. So the politician may try to lie on this platform, but the platform will immediately put a correction like the one you saw in the picture. And I assume that voters will immediately learn if the politician lies and will learn the truth. Okay, finally, what happens if the politician doesn't use a platform? Then it's impossible to learn anything on this platform. So the interesting assumption here is that the platforms cannot provide any information on their own. They need the politician to provide the information. Okay, so here is the timing of the game and also the actions. And after that, I'll talk about the payoffs. Yeah, sorry, can you give me 5 minutes? I think I'll move to another room if you don't mind. Would it be okay?
Yes, of course, of course.
Okay, yeah, I'm really sorry. Next, I'm going to talk about the timing of the game. So the game proceeds as follows. First of all, nature draws theta, where theta again models whether the politician is good or bad. And also nature draws variables, which are the net benefits of fact checking for A and B. So I call them VA and VB. So there are a lot of things which go into these variables, VA and VB. So this could be some public pressure on Facebook to fact check. It could be disgruntled employers who make Facebook fact check. It could be the government which pushes in the same direction, and so on. So these VA and VB are random variables, and they are privately known to the platforms. So let's say if I'm Facebook, I know how much I need to fact check, but I don't know this about Twitter. So next, each platform learns this private information and decides whether to fact check or not. Then the politician observes their decisions. So fact checking is some policy which the platform can write on its website, and it's publicly available to everyone. So when the politician decides whether to use Facebook, Twitter, or both, she knows what kind of environment she's going to be in. So after the politician observes these fact-checking policies, she chooses this bias that I mentioned before, and she chooses which platform to use. So I assume that this bias is the same for two platforms if she's using two platforms. So this means that she has, let's say, one team of advisors who she cites all the time, and she can have a different set of people for Facebook and for Twitter. So next, the voters come into play. So each voter again observes which platforms fact checks, which platform the politician is using, and these bias. So in real terms, the voter can just take a look at Facebook's fact-checking policies. So this is something people talk a lot about, and it becomes public. Or the voter can just look at Facebook and see examples of fact-checking in her newsfeed. So the voter also knows who are the politician's advisors, so what kind of evidence she's providing. So in more general terms, she knows the properties of the information she learns, but she doesn't know the exact realization of theta. But she observes a certain reputation of all these sources. Next, after observing these parameters, the voter decides which platform to use. So I assume that she can use only one. Next, the signal occurs if the politician uses a platform which fact checks. The voter who uses this platform observes the true state of the world, so whether the politician is competent or not. If the politician uses a platform which does not fact check, then the voter gets potentially biased information. Finally, a voter who uses a platform that the politician doesn't use learns nothing about the competence of the politician. So finally, the voter, after observing the signal and not observing anything, the voter makes her decision to vote for or against the politician. Now payoffs. So what do all these people want? So for the politician, it's the most simple kind of calculus. She gets 1 if she wins the election, 0 otherwise. Winning the election here means that at least half of the voters vote for her. The platforms care about two things. First of all, they care about the audience. So the bigger audience Facebook has, the more ads it can sell or the more data it can collect. So the more people spend there, the better. Formally, platform J, the first component of what platform J gets is the share of voters who use it. Moreover, if this platform fact checks, it also earns this V variable, which measures the net benefit from fact checking. So let's say if Facebook earns like public respect and lack of backlash, if it fact checks, then well, they're happy. The voter cares about several things. So first of all, a voter cares about voting for the competent person. So if a voter has ideology R, then if she votes for the politician happens to be competent, she gets a payoff equal to R. So if R is bigger, then on average, I'm more inclined to vote for the politician. So if I vote against the politician, I get some fixed utility U. Here, again, U is the same for all voters and all realizations of theta. This is a simplifying assumption, which doesn't, which makes the model more tractable, but changing it doesn't affect results. So this means that I don't know a lot about the challenger, but I have some expectation what will happen if I vote for her.
I have a clarification question.
Sure.
By competence, do you mean some like objective political competence, or just what the voter likes, which might just be close to her ideology?
Yes, so I mean some objective thing. So there is ideology in this model. It's modeled by this variable R. So if R is bigger, then I just like the person's, let's say, rhetoric or her treatment of Christianity, etc. While theta measures, let's say, what will happen to the economy if this person stays in power. So I imagine that this theta is objective and it's the same for everyone.
Okay.
Okay, so the next thing that voter cares about is using her preferred social media platform. So if she uses platform A, which models Facebook in this model, she gets a fixed benefit M. So M is the same for all voters. So what stands for M? Let's say that Facebook is just big, so a lot of people on Facebook, regardless of any politics. So if I stay at Facebook, I interact with all these people. And if I spend more time on, let's say, Parler, then I don't interact with so many people that I can find on Facebook, so I miss out. Next, Facebook is just better in terms of usability than many other platforms. So let's say there were some bugs when Parler initially started. There were platforms reaching Parler on App Store. So because it's a small platform, it doesn't have a lot of infrastructure that Facebook has to make the experience so good for users. So if I'm using this small platform, then I get no fixed benefit. So, okay, here is the equilibrium. So what I mean by equilibrium, I mean a set of strategies that are best responses to each other. So if I know what all the other players are doing, I prefer doing the thing which the equilibrium prescribes me. Moreover, I assume what's called sequential rationality. So I'm forward-looking. I make my choices based on what I expect people will do. So in this example, if the politician knows that Facebook will fact check her if she stays on Facebook, while Parler will not fact check her if she moves to Parler, and moreover, a lot of people will use Parler. If she goes to Parler, she will use Parler. So she anticipates that other participants of this game are rational and will make the best choice for themselves. And when she makes her early decisions, she takes this into account. Okay, so here's how their behavior looks like. So suppose that the position of the median voter R medium is small in this expression. So this expression depends on the benefit from using Facebook and the benefit from voting for the competitor. So what this inequality implies is that the median voter is far ideologically from the politician. She doesn't really like her. So M is big. That means that there is a big benefit of using Facebook. And finally, U is big. So everyone's expectation of the challenger are quite good. Then what happens? Then because M is high, then platform A is almost a monopoly. So if and this is the situation like the one I told you with Bolsonaro. So because Facebook is so popular, everyone will use it, and the politician cannot credibly threaten to move away from Facebook. So how does it look formally? So first of all, this platform fact checks whenever she has a positive benefit from doing so. So let's say if if for some exogenous reasons it's a good idea for me to fact check, let's say the government really asks me to do so, my employees really ask me to do so, then I fact check. If the costs outweigh the benefits, then I don't fact check. So let's say if fact checking is really expensive and all this external pressure is not that high, I don't do it. So notice that here the costs and benefits are exogenously defined outside of the model. So these are things like external government pressure, employees, cost of maintaining fact checking, etc. So this is modeled by some random variable outside of the model. Because, as I promised you, Facebook is big, then the politician and all voters always use this platform. If the platform doesn't fact check, if this net benefit is negative, then the politician sets the bias equal to this expression. Let's take a small look at how it works. So it positively depends on the position of the median voter. So if the median voter's position increases, then this bias also increases. So why is that? Well, if the median voter becomes more ideologically close to the politician, then even if the politician's arguments in favor of her competence is not very credible, then because of the ideology, the voter may still vote for her, even if there is weak evidence. So because of this, the politician can provide, on average, weaker evidence in favor of her competence and still get the voter on board. So in more realistic terms, if like everyone in the country really likes Trump, then Trump can invite some really conservative yes man into his administration and rely on them as an argument of last resort, and the people will still buy this idea and vote for Trump whenever these people recommend doing so, which they do quite often. So by contrast, if the voter is logically further from Trump, then Trump would require Trump would need the advice Trump would need the approval of more credible people to persuade the voter. So I think the big overarching conclusion, like beyond this paper, is that the more popular is the government, the more it should censor and the more propaganda there should be. So because if you're popular, you don't need to be very sincere, very persuasive to get people to do what you want. So you can engage in more blatant propaganda. And absolutely the same reasoning goes for this effect, that the more popular is the challenger compared to the incumbent, the less the incumbent can engage in propaganda. So let's say if people like someone else more than you, then if you're not persuasive enough, people will not vote for you, and so you need to be really persuasive to make them believe you. Okay, so what happens if we reverse this inequality? So now the median voter is really in favor of the politician. So the challenge is not that popular, so it will be small, and this benefit of using Facebook is also not so large. Then the fact-checking decisions become more interesting. So now there is some, so in the previous scenario, basically it was Facebook being the monopoly, and fact-checking whenever it gives a positive value, not fact-checking when it's a negative value. Now I need to think about what my competitor is doing in terms of fact-checking. So, and the calculus goes like this. So suppose I fact-check. Then my competitor will know that if they don't fact-check, then maybe they can grab a part of my audience. So they have a bigger incentive not to fact-check no matter what I do. So no matter what I do, so they have a bigger incentive to fact-check, to not fact-check on average. So maybe I should not fact-check, even if, let's say, my employees of the government press me to, because if I fact-check, then maybe I'll lose my audience to, let's say, Parler. Then how this behavior is described is mathematically that there are some thresholds, the A star and the B star, such that if the net benefit of fact-checking is sufficiently high, then I fact-check. And if this net benefit is below this threshold, I don't fact-check. So same for platform B, if their net benefit is above some threshold, then they fact-check, otherwise they don't. So notice that these VA star and VB star are exogenous and they're given by the parameters of the game. It's not possible to give explicit formulas for them, but in the paper I show that they indeed exist. So yeah, just to say, these are not some parameters. VA star and VB star, not just some exogenously given parameters that I got to introduce. They are a result of the calculus of the players that emerge in the game. Moreover, they are all non-negative. Now to fact check, I need some positive stimulus to do it. Okay, next, the politician's decision become more interesting as well. Her decision, what platform to use and which bias to set now depends on what the platforms do. So suppose that A does not fact check, then it's good for the politician to use A. Why is that? Because, well, A is big, so if the big platform doesn't fact check, then I can like go there, lie a lot, and reach the majority of voters. And the bias I said is the same as I did in the previous situation when I used A. All right. So what happens if this big platform fact checks? Well, now because this big platform is not so popular, I can go to the smaller platform and still reach the majority of voters. So if A fact checks and B does not, then the politician only uses platform B and sets this bias. So notice that this bias is smaller than this bias. So why is that? Well, because now I'm using something like Parler, which is smaller than Facebook. So I can indeed induce the majority of people to use Parler and listen to what I say, but it's harder compared to using Facebook because Parler is not so big. So people need some extra incentive to join Parler. So because of this, I need to be a bit more sincere to give them some information which will help them make their decisions, which will allow me to have not just my fans, but also the median voter to join Parler. So to persuade not some loyalists, but some neutral people, I need to provide some credible information to make people go from Facebook to Parler and follow my posts. Interesting phenomenon happens here, which is quite realistic, and which we can call the fragmentation of views. So people who are ideologically people to the right of the median voter, so people starting from the median voter and everyone who likes the politician more than the median voter use Parler. So they use the smaller platform that the politician is using, and they do so because the politician is using it. So while people to the left of the median voter, they use A. So this is a bit like United States now, where conservatives live in Facebook for Parler because they can find some conservative politicians there. Various liberals are using Facebook. So it's not by coincidence that the split is exactly the median voter, because the politician sets this bias exactly such that exactly half of people follow him on Parler. So why exactly half? Because if I set bias a bit higher, then I become less credible. So the majority of people wouldn't like to listen to me. Let's say the median voter who is not partisan will not trust me and will not go to Parler. Whereas if I become more sincere, then yes, okay, I get more voters than the majority. So voters even to the left of the median voter will go to Parler to absorb what I say because I'm so credible. But in this case, I get more than the majority of people who observe my signals. I don't need that. So I only need exactly the majority to vote to get to win the election. So I don't have an incentive to be so credible. I can lie a bit more, have a bit less people, but send people positive news about myself with a higher probability. So finally, if it so happens that both platforms fact check, then the politician uses both and all voters use A. So why is that? Because if they both fact check, then it's the same kind of signal on both platforms. But because A has this exogenous benefit to all its users, then the politician then all voters use A. So here's the main result. Imagine that there is a government which is concerned with long-term consequences of fact-checking, and it wants to increase the probability that voters vote for the competent person. I think it relates to Sarah's question. Voters care about ideology and competence, and suppose that we want to maximize the probability that people vote for the competent person regardless of ideology. So then this probability increases in the attractiveness of the bigger platform compared to the smaller platform. So it increases in attractiveness of Facebook compared to Parler. So again, why is that? Because if Facebook is really attractive, then if it fact checks, then the politician cannot go away. It decreases in the politician's ideological proximity to the median voter, because if the median voter is close to the politician can lie and still persuade. So the opposite effect is with the attractiveness of the competitor. So we cannot realistically affect the ideologies of people or the quality of the challenger. What we can possibly affect is the quality of Facebook and its attractiveness compared to the competitors. So specifically, the policy recommendation of this paper is that if we divide Facebook into small companies, let's say 2 companies, then none of them will have this advantage that Facebook currently does. And as a result of this, voters will be more happy to move from one platform to another. And because of this, it will be easier for the politician to credibly threaten a platform that fact checks her to move to another platform. And so by exploiting this competition, she'll create a race to the bottom and achieve a lower probability of fact checking. So another policy implication is that it might be not a good idea to mandate the platforms to make it easier for voters to move their data around from one platform to another. So there is actually such law which is recently passed that mandates the platforms like Facebook to facilitate the transfer of data to fellow platforms, to other platforms. So the justification of that is that it's good if voters have more ability to stop using Facebook, because otherwise Facebook is a monopoly. We don't like monopolies. But on the other hand, the model suggests that if Facebook is a monopoly, then fact checking is more likely. So these novel kind of regulation can have an effect that backfires. Yes. So finally, here is some graph which gives a simulation for the probability of correct choice. So the x-axis is the attractiveness of the bigger platform M. The y-axis is the probability of correct choice that society is making. So notice that there is a discontinuity in this graph. So basically, if we're here, then M is small, then both platforms fact check or not, and the politician may use both platforms. So as M increases, the politician has to be more sincere if she uses the smaller platform. So finally, there is a jump here. It means that we are switching to a regime where Facebook is a monopoly, and now the politician is only using A, and it only boils down to A whether we have fact checking or not. And because of this freedom, A fact checks more often. Because in this situation, the politician uses A anyway, this attractiveness of M doesn't matter for bias anymore, because the politician doesn't need to do anything about the bias to make voters switch to A. Everyone is already on A, so it doesn't matter. Okay, yeah, here's a conclusion. If basically one platform is more attractive to the other, then there is more fact checking and more honest communication. So because of these, voters become more informed and they make better choices. And so because of these, making Facebook is less of a monopoly is not a good idea. So like further research is first of all something that I'm working on with my co-author. So in this presentation, this article, I assume that the politician's competence is something exogenously given by a random variable. But it's an interesting question, like what happens if the politician can simultaneously decide what to do and whether to exert effort, and at the same time she engages in propaganda. So what happens in this case? Next, notice that this model is completely rationalist. So here, voters don't get any additional benefit from confirming their point of view. So if you're ideologically more close to the politician, then like on average, you're interested in her signal, but you don't get an intrinsic utility from confirming your point of view. So, and finally, in this model, fact checking is always a good thing. So if I fact check, then I simply make the politician speak the truth. So I simply correct misinformation. It's not possible for me to, let's say, distort the information to make the politician I like win more often. So there is really no evidence of, I would be aware of platforms doing this. So disguising fact-checking, disguising some propaganda as fact-checking, but technically it's possible, and some people are concerned by that. So it would be interesting to model that, although it's like much harder and will probably be done in further papers. Yeah, so I think, oh, I think I've already been talking for an hour, and I think it's better to wrap up and move to your questions and comments, which I'm excited to hear. So yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. It was a very nice model, and thanks very much for presenting this. So maybe there are already questions in the audience, and there are indeed. So Sercha, maybe you can start.
Hi, Arseniy. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about voters' registration to a given platform. It seems like you're modeling it really just based on